Section 1. Modern Throne of Leadership. Imagine Marcus ruling today's chaotic world stage. What made Roman emperors never worry about the future? You've been living wrong if you haven't learned this from Epictetus. In the next 3 minutes, you'll understand why Marcus chose silence over arguing. Marcus Aurelius taught this, and if you understand it, you'll never get angry again. Picture it, a Roman courtyard at dusk, oil lamps flickering against marble pillars, the hum of distant city streets carrying faintly through colonnades. You hear the sandals of soldiers pacing outside the walls, while within the emperor sits with a simple wax tablet in hand, whispering words not to an audience but to himself. He is writing what will later become the Meditations. Now pause and imagine that figure, Marcus Aurelius, not in a toga, but in a modern suit, not surrounded by centurions, but security details, not holding scrolls, but glowing screens filled with data. He walks into the United Nations, or into a press conference room in Washington, London, or Tokyo. How would the quiet wisdom of his Stoic reflection guide him here on this modern throne of leadership, where the stakes are not provinces and legions, but nations and billions of lives? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. To understand this better, let's go back to an ancient lesson from Marcus Aurelius. You stand with him at the edge of his rule when Rome stretched from the deserts of Egypt to the cold forests of Britain. He was an emperor who didn't crave power. Rather, power was thrust upon him. His heart wanted philosophy, not conquest, yet duty demanded he shoulder both. The irony of history is that he became one of the most powerful men alive precisely because he wanted nothing for himself. And now you ask, if such a man ruled today's chaotic world stage, would we finally see peace? The Stoic principle that Marcus lived by was simple but demanding. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In ancient Rome, this helped him govern calmly during plagues, wars, and political conspiracies. In the 21st century, it might help him avoid the modern disease of leaders' constant reaction. Think of how often presidents and prime ministers are dragged by the tide of news cycles, manipulated by tweets, headlines, or market crashes. A Stoic leader would stand apart, observing without frenzy, choosing only deliberate action. But here is a hard truth you may not endure easily. Self-mastery is harder than ruling nations. If you cannot discipline your own thoughts, how will you hope to govern billions of souls? Marcus wrestled with his own temper, with grief for lost children, with weariness from endless wars. And yet he never excused himself. He wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Imagine how rare those words would sound in today's political theater, where lies are currency and outrage is strategy. Now imagine this: Marcus in the Oval Office, cameras flashing, a reporter pressing him with a hostile question. Instead of snapping back, instead of rehearsed evasions, he pauses. The silence itself becomes the answer, his calm gaze disarming the room. In that stillness, he embodies a lesson Rome's streets once knew. When the emperor himself is not shaken, the empire steadies. Of course, scholars still debate whether Stoicism can truly scale. Can a philosophy that urges detachment from outcomes be practical for a world leader who must pursue results? Wouldn't a Marcus Aurelius of today be criticized for not being decisive enough, or for being too inward-looking? This is where the paradox lies. Perhaps his strength would come not from ignoring results, but from anchoring himself so firmly in principle that his decisions once made would be incorruptible. And here you find yourself wondering, would such leadership make the world more peaceful? Not immediately. Marcus himself fought wars. The northern tribes tested Rome's borders again and again. peace was not guaranteed. Yet his leadership offered a different kind of peace, a peace within the heart of the leader unshaken by ambition or hatred. And that inner peace multiplied in decisions and policies might ripple outward to nations. You step closer into this vision of Marcus as a modern leader. The skyscrapers around him replace Rome's marble columns, but the human condition remains the same. Fear, greed, anger, division, they echo across centuries. And you begin to see that the throne of leadership is never truly about titles or thrones. It is about whether the man or woman sitting there can master themselves. Section 2, From Scrolls to Smartphones. How Stoic wisdom adapts to instant digital life. From scrolls to smartphones, your mind drifts to the image of Marcus Aurelius, once again seated by candlelight ink staining his fingers as he inscribed words meant only for himself. The meditations were private notes, reminders written in the solitude of tents on battlefields or the quiet of palaces. No audience, no applause, only self-discipline. Now you place him in the 21st century, where the silence of parchment is replaced by the glowing buzz of smartphones, where every leader's thought is expected to be broadcast, every pause filled with comment, every doubt dissected by millions of strangers within seconds. Could Marcus adapt, or would the noise drown him? The Stoic answer is subtle. He would not shun technology itself, after all. Stoicism teaches that tools are neither good nor bad, only how you use them matters. The question is not whether Marcus would scroll Twitter, but whether he would let Twitter scroll through his mind. And here his own teaching rings out. You become what you give your attention to. If the Emperor of Rome warned against distraction in a world of chariots and gossiping senators, how much louder would his voice sound? In a world of instant notifications, endless feeds, and the tyranny of the trending topic, picture a leader today, fingers nervously refreshing news apps before stepping into a crisis meeting. Markets dip, headlines scream, an unverified rumor spirals into panic. Such a leader reacts just as billions of us react, chained by our devices. Marcus, however, would treat the smartphone as he once treated the scroll, a vessel for thought, not a master of it. He might use it to record daily reflections, just as he once etched into wax tablets. Perhaps he would dictate meditations into a private audio log never meant for public ears. In his hands, technology becomes a mirror, not a megaphone. And yet scholars still argue, is Stoic detachment realistic in the age of mass connectivity? A ruler who ignores public clamor risks appearing aloof, even unresponsive. But Marcus knew this tension well. In Rome, the crowd roared for blood. In the Colosseum, demanded victories, demanded entertainment. He refused to indulge their worst impulses. He bore their criticism because he saw the deeper truth that the leader must not become a servant to the mob's passions. In our century, the mob has multiplied through screens, but the principle remains unchanged. Consider this in times of crisis when false information spreads like wildfire online. Would Marcus rush to calm the masses with hollow reassurances? Or would he, as he did in Rome during plague, accept the gravity of the truth, speak plainly, and let calm honesty replace panic? Imagine a global pandemic, leaders racing to control narrative, blame shifting across continents. Now picture Marcus Aurelius seated in front of cameras, speaking with the same tone he once used to remind himself, "If it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining." No dramatics, no blame, no panic. Just a quiet appeal to courage and endurance. There is a personal challenge in this for you too. How often do you lose yourself in the endless scroll, chasing novelty, reacting with anger to strangers' words, letting your mood be pulled by pixels? Marcus's lesson across centuries is clear: treat the scroll of your phone as you would the scroll of Rome. Read with care. Write with purpose. Avoid excess. The device in your hand can be a philosopher's journal, or a tyrant's chain, depending on how you wield it. From scrolls to smartphones, the technology has changed, but the battle has not. The battle is for your attention, for your inner sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius in the 21st century would show by example that sovereignty is never surrendered to the device, the feed, or the noise. It belongs only to the mind that governs itself. And so as you walk with him from the marble atrium into the glowing skyscraper of modernity, you realize this: the test of leadership has only become sharper. For if an emperor once had to rule armies and provinces, a leader today must also rule the storm of information. And the first step, Marcus whispers, is to master what you let into your own mind. Section 3, Walker. Calm amid global storms. Applying his discipline of mind to modern crises. Calm amid global storms, you picture the emperor again, though this time the battlefield is no longer a muddy frontier on the Danube. Instead, it is the 21st century markets plunging in seconds, climate disasters filling screens, sudden terrorist attacks reshaping politics overnight, and leaders scrambling to keep pace with a storm of crises. You watch Marcus Aurelius step into this chaos not with frantic gestures or shouting orders, but with the quiet poise of a man who knows that the storm outside is nothing compared to the storm within. He once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." These words, penned during Rome's Antonine Plague, were not abstract philosophy. They were survival. He lost children to illness, watched armies weakened by disease, and ruled a city terrified by uncertainty. And still, he reminded himself daily that serenity must begin in the mind of the leader, for panic at the top breeds collapse below. If Marcus stood at a modern podium during a global storm, whether it be a financial meltdown or an unprecedented natural disaster, he would begin by stilling himself first. The question presses against you: could such calm survive in a world where crises unfold, live on television, replayed across millions of devices? Scholars still debate whether Stoic composure in the face of catastrophe would look like courage or coldness. Would a leader who refuses to panic be praised for steadying the people or accused of indifference? Marcus faced the same paradox. When Rome demanded action, he gave it, but without hysteria, without the indulgence of rage. He believed that emotion, once it became master, blinded judgment. If you are distressed by anything external, he reminded himself, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Now imagine him at a modern climate summit. Delegates argue, scientists warn, activists demand urgent action. Marcus listens, but he does not let their fear stampede him into shallow promises. Instead, he weighs calmly what must be done, what is within his control, what is just. That composure, so rare among leaders today, might seem slow to a restless world, but it would carry the weight of genuine steadiness. Decisions born from panic often fracture. Decisions born from calm endure. You walk beside him in this vision. Outside storms rage, economic collapse, political unrest, even the shadow of war. But inside his mind, there is stillness. This is not passivity. It is the discipline to act without being ruled by fear. And he would expect the same of you. For Stoicism was never written for emperors alone. It was written for anyone who struggles against the storm of circumstance. Do not pray for an easy life, Marcus might say to you now, but pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. But here you confront an unsettling thought. In our century, calm can be mistaken for weakness. Politicians win attention by raising their voices, by exaggerating threats, by dramatizing their role as savior. What happens to the leader who refuses to play that game? Would Marcus Aurelius be ignored? Would his measured words be drowned by the noise? Or perhaps precisely because he is different, his calm would shine brighter. In the loudest age, silence can be the strongest voice. History offers evidence. During the Marcomannic Wars, when his legions were strained and the empire trembled, Marcus Aurelius chose not to abandon philosophy. He continued to write each night, strengthening the fortress within his mind. That discipline, invisible to his soldiers, made him the kind of leader who could return to the battlefield without being consumed by fear or despair. If he brought that same discipline into today's storms, perhaps we would find the courage to endure alongside him. As you reflect on this, you realize the teaching is not only about global leaders, it is about you. When your own life is swept by storms, financial loss, illness, uncertainty, how do you respond? Do you let fear drive you into desperate action? Or do you, like Marcus, pause, steady your breathing, and act only when your judgment is clear? The world's storms will not end. But within you, there can be calm. And in that calm lies strength, not only for you, but for all who look to you for guidance. Section 4, Malchus. Power without corruption. Would Marcus resist today's temptations of wealth? Power without corruption, you picture Marcus Aurelius once again stepping into the bright glare of 21st century politics. In a world where lobbyists crowd the halls of government, where corporations whisper into the ears of presidents and prime ministers, where wealth so easily distorts justice, you wonder, would Marcus the philosopher emperor stand untouched? In his lifetime, Rome was not free of corruption. Senators schemed, generals plotted, and bribes oiled the machinery of power. Yet Marcus remained unusually untainted. He lived modestly despite ruling the richest empire of his age, preferring a simple cloak to embroidered robes, writing meditations instead of celebrating conquests. He reminded himself, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." That reminder of mortality, whispered nightly, acted like a shield against greed. For why hoard treasures when tomorrow is never promised? Now transpose him into our century. Imagine him seated in the Oval Office or a global summit room, presented with choices: bend to financial interests or act for the common good. Where many would rationalize compromise, Marcus would weigh justice above all. He once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. No loopholes, no exceptions." That clarity would make him a rare figure in a world accustomed to leaders who trade integrity for influence. And yet scholars might question, can purity of principle survive the machinery of modern politics? Could even Marcus Aurelius resist the subtle corruption of endless campaign funding, the temptation of personal legacy projects, the charm of flattery whispered by allies? His own reign hints at the answer. Though emperor, he shared power with Lucius Verus, and later with his son Commodus. He endured the burden of compromise, but his compass remained steady. Even when granting favor, he reminded himself that fortune is borrowed, not owned. Picture this contrast. One leader today grows intoxicated by the spotlight, inflates wealth, and surrounds himself with luxury. Marcus, by contrast, would likely live as he once did, writing reflections late at night, appearing in public without extravagance, and reminding his people that virtue, not possessions, is the only true wealth. His very restraint would unsettle those who thrive on displays of excess. Where others prove strength by accumulation, Marcus would prove it by refusal. But here lies a challenge. In our world, restraint is often mistaken for weakness. A leader who declines wealth might be viewed as naive, even ineffective. Would Marcus's stoic poverty disarm corruption, or simply make him an outlier in a system designed to exploit? Perhaps both. Perhaps his example would not eradicate corruption, but it would expose its emptiness. In the same way, his meditations reveal the futility of chasing fame. His life in modern politics would remind the world that no title, no fortune, no applause can change the fact that death comes for all. This lesson reaches into your own life too. How often are you tempted to compromise for gain at work and relationships, even in small daily decisions? The temptation of corruption is not only for emperors. It is for anyone who exchanges principle for advantage. Marcus's reminder presses against you: hold the line even when no one is watching. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. In this century where appearance often triumphs over substance, such advice is revolutionary. You imagine him addressing a press corps today. Questions fire from every direction, some baited, some manipulative. He answers only what is necessary, declining to embellish. His honesty is stark, his refusal to play games unsettling. For those seeking power plays, he offers no entertainment. For those seeking truth, he offers everything. And perhaps over time, that difference would carve out a new model of leadership, one where power does not corrupt, but clarifies. The world may never be rid of corruption, but under a Stoic leader it might remember that corruption is not inevitable. For the real empire a man governs is not Rome, not a nation, not an economy, it is himself. And Marcus Aurelius, even in this noisy century, would rule himself first. Section 5 Doctrines. Media and spectacle. Navigating fame and social media through Stoic restraint. Media and spectacle. You imagine Marcus Aurelius facing not a Roman forum of senators or a crowd in the Colosseum, but banks of cameras, journalists with microphones, and millions of screens broadcasting his every word in real time. Today's leaders are not only statesmen, they are performers on the stage of global media where spectacle often eclipses substance. Would Marcus Aurelius, philosopher, emperor, yield to this age of endless exposure? Or would he resist the seduction of appearances? In Rome, he already knew the dangers of spectacle. The gladiatorial games drew tens of thousands roaring for blood, demanding distraction from their daily hardships. Marcus tolerated these spectacles because tradition demanded it, but he did not indulge them. He wrote of the vanity of applause, how quickly the crowd forgets how hollow the pursuit of fame. Consider how swiftly all things are dissolved and resolved. He reminded himself how the applause of the crowd is mere clapping of hands. For him, the spectacle was a dangerous drug, addictive, fleeting, and corrosive to virtue. Now transpose him into the glare of today's media. Would he hold rallies designed to inflame emotions? Would he trade in slogans that trend online but mean little in action? It is hard to imagine. Instead, Marcus might stand awkwardly against the rhythm of modern politics, refusing to tailor his words for applause. He would speak plainly, perhaps even too plainly, for a world addicted to performance. Imagine a leader who declines spin doctors, who avoids exaggeration, who lets truth stand even if it costs him popularity. Could such a leader even survive the modern media cycle? Scholars debate, this is integrity enough in a world built on spectacle, or must a leader adapt to survive? Consider how leaders today rise not only by governance, but by cultivating personal brands. A Marcus Aurelius in the 21st century might refuse such branding. His meditations were never meant to be read by others, and yet they outlasted marble statues and golden inscriptions. The irony of his restraint is that it became his greatest legacy. By not chasing fame, he gained immortality. Perhaps in this century, refusing to perform for cameras would have the same paradoxical effect. The world starved for authenticity might finally listen. Yet the danger is real. A leader who does not play the game risks being overshadowed by those who do. Imagine Marcus at a televised debate. His opponent delivers sharp one-liners crafted to go viral. Marcus, calm and deliberate, refuses to spar. The audience, restless, might misinterpret his composure as weakness. But over time, as the noise fades, his words linger. Stoic endurance teaches that truth does not need immediacy. It endures longer than spectacle. This lesson is not only for leaders, it is for you. How often do you perform for the gaze of others? On social media, in conversations, even in small gestures, do you seek applause rather than truth? Marcus Aurelius whispers across centuries, "It is not fame that makes you good, nor obscurity that makes you worthless." What matters is the alignment of your actions with virtue, not how loudly the world claps. Imagine then Marcus addressing the world after a crisis. Where modern leaders might choreograph backdrops, hire speechwriters to polish phrases and practice gestures to appear strong, Marcus would walk out without spectacle. His words would be few, his presence calm. He would not give the audience what it wanted, but what it needed: clarity, honesty, perspective. And perhaps precisely because he refused spectacle, he would create the most powerful spectacle of all, a man unbent by performance. The world today hungers for this. Beneath the noise, beneath the endless cycle of headlines, there is a quiet yearning for leaders who mean what they say and who say only what is true. Marcus Aurelius in the 21st century would not master the spectacle, he would transcend it. And in doing so, he might teach the rest of us how to live without being enslaved to the applause of strangers. Section 6. Justice in democracy. Translating Roman fairness into today's political systems. Justice in democracy, you picture Marcus Aurelius standing not in the imperial palace but in a parliamentary chamber or a modern courtroom. The questions swirling around him are no longer about the loyalty of legions or the tribute of provinces, but about representation, fairness, and the delicate machinery of democracy. Could a Stoic emperor raised in the hierarchy of Rome adapt to a system where power is shared, where laws are debated, and where leaders are held accountable by citizens rather than by divine right? Though Marcus ruled as emperor, his reign bore marks of a democratic spirit. He sought counsel from philosophers, respected the Senate's voice, and often tempered his own authority with dialogue. He reminded himself in meditations, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee." That single line could serve as the foundation of modern democracy, for it demands that the good of the community outweighs the convenience of the ruler. In today's world, justice is tangled with bureaucracy, partisanship, and the pursuit of advantage. Leaders twist laws to benefit allies, bend rules to retain power, or manipulate systems to silence dissent. Would Marcus stand apart? Consider his handling of treason in Rome. Unlike many emperors before him who spilled rivers of blood at the faintest whisper of betrayal, Marcus showed clemency. He chose mercy over vengeance, restraint over cruelty. Imagine him today faced with political opponents. Rather than crushing them, he would allow them space to speak, trusting that truth, not force, sustains justice. But democracy poses challenges that Rome never knew. Leaders today are bound not only to principle, but to the voices of millions, fractured and often contradictory. Scholars might question whether Stoic detachment could withstand the constant demands of constituencies. Would Marcus, in seeking to rise above partisanship, appear too distant from the passions of the people? Would his calm seem like indifference in a world that expects leaders to echo outrage? The paradox deepens. Stoicism insists that justice must never be compromised, but modern politics rewards those who bend. Picture Marcus at a congressional hearing, grilled by lawmakers eager for soundbites. He does not argue, does not evade. He listens, weighs, and answers plainly. His words carry no flourish, only clarity. If it is unjust, I will not do it. If it is unjust, I will not defend it. The chamber falls uneasy, for his refusal to play the game exposes the game itself. In that moment, justice is not a political tool, it is a moral compass. For you, this teaching also cuts close. How often do you compromise justice in small ways, by staying silent when truth should be spoken, by choosing comfort over fairness, by excusing wrongs because they benefit you? Marcus's life reminds you that justice is not defined by laws alone, but by the integrity of each action. The best revenge, he wrote, is not to be like your enemy. In democracy, as in daily life, justice means refusing to mirror the corruption you oppose. If Marcus Aurelius led in the 21st century, democracy might regain its philosophical heart. Not the shouting, not the endless campaigns, not the pursuit of polls, but the steady reminder that government exists for the common good. He would not abolish disagreement, for disagreement is natural. He would not erase conflict, for conflict is part of human affairs. But he would anchor the system in principle, reminding leaders and citizens alike that justice must not serve factions, but humanity. And in this vision, you see a quiet possibility, a world where democracy is not driven by spectacle or selfish ambition, but by a shared pursuit of virtue. Perhaps it would not be perfect. Stoicism never promises perfection. But under Marcus, it might be just enough to restore faith, just enough to turn the tide toward fairness, just enough to remind you that justice is not an ideal for philosophers alone, but a duty for every citizen. Section 7. War and Peacekeeping. How Stoicism would shape modern conflict resolution. War and peacekeeping, you stand again beside Marcus Aurelius, though now the horizon is filled not with Roman legions and square formations, but with tanks, drones, and satellites. In his own life, Marcus spent much of his reign at war, particularly against the Germanic tribes pressing Rome's northern borders. He would have preferred a life of study and contemplation, yet history thrust the sword into his hand. And so he fought not with hunger for conquest, but with the reluctant duty of one who saw war as a grim necessity. War is the province of fortune, he reflected, and must be endured with courage, not celebrated with pride. Now you transpose him into the 21st century, where conflict is both more devastating and more preventable. Would Marcus become a general in the old sense, or would he become a peacekeeper in the modern sense? Consider how he once treated his enemies. Historical accounts show that he did not despise the Germanic tribes. He respected their resilience and sought to integrate them into Rome's fabric rather than annihilate them. Imagine him today negotiating peace treaties, preferring dialogue over destruction, seeing opponents not as monsters, but as fellow human beings caught in circumstance. Yet here lies the paradox. Stoic philosophy insists on focusing only on what lies within your control. Could Marcus ruling today accept that peace is never entirely within one man's control? Would his restraint be tested when faced with aggressors who thrive on chaos? In his time, he knew this struggle well. Even while writing Meditations in the war camp, he reminded himself, "You may leave this life at any moment. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That awareness of mortality might make him less inclined to wage wars of pride, more inclined to secure peace that endures beyond his reign. Imagine him presiding over the United Nations Security Council. Where modern leaders posture with threats, Marcus listens. He asks not what serves Rome, or in this case his own nation, but what serves the world. He considers the civilians who will bear the brunt of bombs, the children who will inherit ruins instead of fields. His stoic duty would guide him toward the path of peace, for justice that ignores the innocent is no justice at all. Yet if war becomes unavoidable, he would conduct it with discipline, swift, restrained, and without cruelty. Scholars debate whether such an approach would be practical in a world where aggression often rewards the bold. Could Marcus's philosophy restrain leaders who thrive on violence? Perhaps not always. But his leadership would change the tone. War would no longer be paraded as a symbol of strength, but acknowledged as a failure of human unity. That shift alone could alter how nations approach conflict. And this lesson is not just for emperors or presidents, it is for you. In your own life, how often do you wage small wars, arguments, resentments, rivalries? Do you strike to win, or do you pause to seek understanding? Marcus's example reminds you that the greatest victory is often not in defeating another, but in refusing to be conquered by hatred. The best way of avenging yourself, he said, is not to become like the wrongdoer. That principle applied at the scale of nations or of individuals is the seed of peace. Picture him on the battlefield of today, not riding a horse among legionaries, but standing in a command center where screens glow with satellite images. His voice is calm. His orders are clear: protect the innocent, restrain the hand of vengeance, act only with justice. Soldiers under such a leader would fight not for glory, but for duty. Enemies, even while opposed, would be treated as men, not monsters. And you, standing beside him in this vision, sense the weight of the lesson: war may never vanish. But peace begins in the way you choose to see your enemy. Under Marcus Aurelius in the 21st century, peacekeeping would not be mere diplomacy. It would be philosophy in action, Stoicism practiced on the battlefield, seeking not triumph but harmony. Section 8. Economy and Greed. Marcus's take on consumerism and endless material hunger. Economy and greed. You see Marcus Aurelius again, this time not on a battlefield or before senators, but in the corridors of banks' parliaments and financial summits. The modern empire is not measured in legions or land, but in GDP, stock markets, and consumption. In the 21st century, leaders are judged by economic growth, and citizens are taught to measure their lives by wealth and possessions. Would Marcus, a man who reminded himself that very little is needed to make a happy life, survive in such a world of insatiable hunger? In Rome, he already saw the distortions of greed. The empire was vast, its cities adorned with marble, its elites drunk on luxury. Yet Marcus lived simply. He preferred a modest diet, wore plain clothing, and even while emperor reminded himself each morning that fortune was borrowed, never owned. When famine struck, he sold treasures from the imperial palace to feed his people. Imagine such an act today, a leader auctioning off national luxuries, not to enrich himself, but to relieve the suffering of the poor. Would the world even believe it? Or would they call it weakness? The modern economy thrives on desire. Advertising whispers that you are incomplete until you buy more, that your worth is measured in things. But Marcus warned against this centuries ago. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. If he ruled today, he would not celebrate consumerism. He would restrain it. He might promote sustainability over growth, well-being over profit. Scholars might argue that such restraint would cost him politically, for modern societies equate prosperity with abundance. Yet perhaps his leadership would remind the world that endless growth on a finite planet is not prosperity, but delusion. Picture him at a G20 summit surrounded by leaders boasting of booming economies. When his turn comes, he speaks softly. What does it profit a nation to gain the world but lose its soul? His words echo not as a slogan, but as a challenge. Could nations redefine success, not by how much they consume, but by how justly they live? He would likely shift attention toward equity, ensuring that the poor are not left behind, that wealth is not hoarded in palaces while streets grow hungry. And yet Marcus would also face the shadows of human desire. Even in his Rome, corruption thrived, and not every citizen embraced his restraint. In the 21st century, he might face resistance from corporations, billionaires, even ordinary citizens unwilling to give up comforts. Could his philosophy withstand such pressure? Perhaps. For Marcus did not demand perfection. He demanded effort. If a thing is difficult, he wrote, that is no reason why it should not be done. Slowly, his example might shift the culture, not abolishing greed overnight, but reminding each person that freedom lies not in abundance, but in mastery over desire. For you, this lesson strikes close. How often do you measure your worth by what you own, by the salary you earn, by the possessions you display? Marcus whispers across centuries, none of it lasts. Death levels kings and beggars alike, and no treasure follows you beyond the grave. The true wealth is the peace of a mind unshaken by loss, untempted by excess. Imagine him walking through a modern shopping mall surrounded by glittering signs, endless options, and the hum of commerce. He pauses, observes quietly, and turns to you. Does all this make people free or enslaved? His question lingers, uncomfortable yet necessary, for in the heart of the 21st century's economy lies a choice to be ruled by desire or to rule desire itself. And so, if Marcus Aurelius were a leader today, the economy would no longer be a race for more. It would become a practice of balance, justice, and restraint. Perhaps the numbers on spreadsheets would grow more slowly, but the souls of people might finally grow lighter. And in that, the empire of greed could finally give way to the republic of contentment. Section 9, Successor. The Climate Challenge. Stoic duty toward nature and stewardship of Earth. The climate challenge, you imagine Marcus Aurelius walking not through the marble forums of Rome, but across a conference floor where world leaders gather beneath banners reading Climate Summit. The air is heavy with urgency. Charts of rising seas and burning forests flicker on screens, while voices clash over emissions, profit, and responsibility. How would a Stoic emperor, who once wrote all things are woven together and the common bond is sacred, confront this greatest test of stewardship in the 21st century? In his own time, Marcus Aurelius understood that Rome was not separate from nature, but a part of it. He often reminded himself in meditations that man is a little soul carrying a corpse, utterly dependent on the cycles of life, water, and earth. He knew the fragility of existence. Plagues swept the empire, harvests failed, and wars disrupted the delicate balance of supply. Unlike many rulers intoxicated by conquest, Marcus saw his role as guardian rather than owner. He did not view the world as his to exploit, but as his to protect for the sake of others. Now imagine him transported to the present, watching glaciers collapse and wildfires sweep continents. Where many leaders argue about cost, he would ask about duty. What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee, he once said. Applied today, it means no nation survives if the planet fails. No economy thrives if the soil is barren. No empire endures if the air itself is poison. The climate crisis, in his Stoic eyes, would not be a partisan debate but a moral imperative. Yet the Stoic response is not to despair. Marcus did not despair even when plague carried off thousands daily. He reminded himself instead, "You have power over your mind." To leaders today, he would say, focus on what you can do, not on what you cannot. Cut emissions, restore forests, innovate for clean energy. Do not waste years in denial or blame. Act where action is possible. This principle of focusing on the controllable could transform paralysis into progress. But here lies the paradox: could Stoic restraint overcome modern greed? Would corporations and governments that profit from destruction accept Marcus's philosophy of duty? Scholars might argue that his calm voice would be drowned out by lobbyists and populists who promise comfort now and ignore tomorrow. Yet history offers a clue. In Rome, when famine struck, Marcus sold imperial treasures rather than burden the people with more taxes. His willingness to sacrifice comfort for the common good might inspire a new model of leadership today, one where leaders lead not by speeches, but by personal example. Imagine him riding in an electric car, living modestly, redirecting wealth towards sustainability, not as a gesture, but as conviction. For you, the lesson presses into daily life. How do you treat the world around you? Do you see it as mere resource or as a trust you must pass on? The Stoic view reminds you that you are not apart from nature, you are nature. To poison it is to poison yourself. To neglect it is to neglect your own soul. Picture Marcus walking along a polluted riverbank in a modern city, watching plastic drift where fish once swam. He does not rage, nor does he look away. He simply turns to you and says, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. So make your thought one of duty." It is not despair that moves him, but responsibility. If Marcus Aurelius ruled in the 21st century, climate change would not be dismissed as an inconvenience or debated as politics. It would be faced as a sacred duty, for the bond between humanity and earth is as binding as the bond between emperor and people. And perhaps under such leadership, humanity would begin to see the world not as a warehouse of goods, but as a living home, fragile, fleeting, and worthy of reverence. Section 10. Technology and ethics. Would Stoic reasoning guide AI and biotech advances? Technology and ethics. You picture Marcus Aurelius not in a Roman war camp, but in a sleek modern lab where glowing screens show the blueprint of artificial intelligence, where scientists debate genetic engineering, and where the boundaries of human power stretch further than ever before. In Rome, he wrestled with plagues and wars. In the 21st century, he would wrestle with a different frontier: how to govern technology that evolves faster than morality. Marcus was no stranger to tools of power. He commanded vast armies, relied on Roman engineering, and benefited from the infrastructure of aqueducts, roads, and medicine. Yet he never mistook tools for virtue. He reminded himself, everything is only for a day, both that which remembers and that which is remembered. Applied to our world, this means no invention, however dazzling, excuses the corruption of character. What matters is not whether humanity can create machines that think or genes that shift, but whether it can wield such power without losing its soul. Imagine him overseeing debates about artificial intelligence. Some voices argue for limitless expansion, faster systems, more profit, even autonomous weapons. Others warn of catastrophe. Marcus would listen calmly, weigh the arguments, and remind all present that tools serve humanity, not the other way around. A man's worth is measured by the objects he pursues, he might say. If humanity pursues power without justice, then even the most brilliant technology becomes ruin. Consider also biotechnology. Modern leaders are confronted with choices about altering life itself: gene editing, cloning, extending human lifespans. Would Marcus, who accepted death as a natural part of existence, endorse a pursuit to abolish it? Likely not. He once wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." In his vision, the Stoic goal is not immortality, but virtue in the time given. He might caution that chasing eternal life risks losing sight of the life worth living. Scholars would debate whether such restraint is practical. In a competitive world, could a Stoic leader slow the race for innovation without dooming his nation to fall behind? Perhaps Marcus would accept that risk. For him, justice outweighed advantage. If refusing to unleash dangerous technology cost Rome dominance, he would still choose restraint. For what is the value of empire or of nations today if gained at the cost of humanity's essence? Picture him in a press conference after a breakthrough discovery. A scientist announces an AI capable of governing military drones. The crowd expects triumph. Marcus speaks instead of limits. Just as we restrain the sword, lest it harm the innocent, so must we restrain the machine. His words are not designed to inspire applause, but to anchor humanity in responsibility. And for you, the lesson echoes personally. How do you wield the tools in your own life? Your phone, your computer, your access to endless knowledge. Do they serve you or do you serve them? Stoicism asks not whether the tool is powerful, but whether you are free while using it. The danger is not in the machine itself, but in your attachment to it, your willingness to let it shape you, rather than the other way around. Imagine Marcus walking through a modern data center, endless servers humming, storing the lives of billions. He pauses, lays a hand against the cool metal, and whispers, "All this is dust in waiting." He does not mean it is useless. He means it is temporary. And precisely because it is temporary, it must be guided by wisdom, not obsession. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader of the 21st century, technology would not be worshipped as salvation, nor rejected as evil. It would be treated as a tool, a means to serve virtue, to ease suffering, to align humanity with justice. And perhaps under his hand, progress would no longer be a race to conquer, but a journey to cultivate the art of using power without being consumed by it. Section 11 Taunu. Health and Resilience, Enduring Pandemics and Modern Stress the Stoic Way. Health and resilience. You see Marcus Aurelius not in a Roman encampment this time, but in a modern hospital hallway, where fluorescent lights hum and patients lie in beds connected to machines. In his reign, he endured the Antonine Plague, a disease that ravaged the empire for 15 long years, claiming millions of lives. He buried children, lost soldiers, and governed through the constant shadow of illness. Yet his writings reveal no surrender to despair. Instead, he turned suffering into discipline, grief into clarity. Now imagine him in the 21st century, leading through pandemics, stress epidemics, and mental health crises. Would his Stoic approach still offer strength? He would remind you as he reminded himself. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. These words, written amid plague, echo with greater weight in a world shaken by COVID-19 and countless hidden struggles of anxiety, burnout, and depression. His answer to disease was not denial, not false promises of immortality, but a call to gratitude for each moment that remains. You imagine him stepping into a televised address during a pandemic. Instead of spinning numbers or shifting blame, he speaks directly to the people. If it is endurable, then endure it. If it is not, then stop complaining. It will soon end. This is not cruelty, it is honesty delivered with calm compassion. He knew suffering intimately, yet he refused to let it dictate his soul. His philosophy would ask you too, do you allow illness or stress to break your spirit, or do you use them to strengthen your resolve? But health in the 21st century is not only about disease, it is also about the pace of life. Stress is a silent plague, and exhaustion corrodes millions of lives. Marcus knew this too in his own way. His duties as emperor pressed on him daily wars, to command laws, to uphold a city, to manage. And yet every night he returned to his journal, reminding himself that rest for the mind is as essential as breath. People look for retreats for themselves, he wrote, in the country, by the coast, or in the hills. There is nowhere that a man can find a more peaceful retreat than in his own soul. Imagine him teaching this today. He would not encourage escape to luxury resorts or endless distraction through entertainment. He would point you inward. Even if surrounded by chaos, you can retreat into your mind, build a space of stillness, and return stronger. That for Marcus was the truest medicine resilience born from reflection. Scholars might question whether such an inward practice can truly address modern crises. Can journaling or meditation stand against pandemics or structural health inequalities? Marcus would not deny the need for action. He provided aid during famine, sold imperial treasures to relieve suffering, and mobilized legions to stabilize provinces. But he would remind us that no system, no medicine, no government can fully protect you from pain. What you can control is how you endure. The outer fight must be matched with inner resilience, and for you, the teaching is clear. When sickness comes, when stress overwhelms, you may not choose the affliction, but you choose your response. You may collapse into complaint, or you may stand firm, reminding yourself, as Marcus did, that life is not measured by its length, but by its integrity. Imagine walking beside him in a modern hospital ward. He stops at the bedside of a patient struggling with illness. He does not offer false comfort, but he offers presence, calm, and truth. His eyes meet theirs, and he whispers, "You are a soul, not a body. The body may suffer, but the soul remains free if you choose." In that moment, resilience is born, not in denial, but in the acceptance that suffering is part of the human condition. If Marcus Aurelius led in the 21st century, health would not be treated only as survival, but as resilience. Pandemics would still come, stress would still linger, mortality would still remain. But his example would teach the world what Rome once learned, that true health begins in the mind, and resilience is the greatest medicine of all. Section 12. The discipline of desire. Resisting distractions in an age of excess. The discipline of desire. You imagine Marcus Aurelius not in a Roman villa now, but in a glittering modern city where neon lights advertise luxury, where billboards proclaim that happiness is just one purchase away, and where endless temptations whisper at every turn. The 21st century is saturated with desire for wealth, for status, for pleasure, for distraction. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader here, how would his Stoic restraint face a culture built on indulgence? In his meditations, Marcus often reminded himself to beware of desire's trap. "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts," he wrote, "not upon possessions or pleasures." He lived this truth with striking simplicity. As emperor, he had access to unimaginable luxuries, banquets, palaces, concubines, endless wealth. Yet he chose moderation. His meals were modest, his robes plain, his pleasures few, for he believed that desire, once it masters you, makes you a slave. And no emperor, no matter how powerful, is free if enslaved by his cravings. Now place him in the 21st century. Imagine him walking through Times Square or Shibuya Crossing, surrounded by the constant bombardment of advertisements. Imagine him scrolling through social media feeds filled with curated perfection, where envy and longing are stoked with every image. Would Marcus indulge? Or would he look calmly at the noise and remind himself, is this essential? Does this serve virtue? The discipline of desire begins not with denial, but with discernment, choosing wisely what to accept, what to refuse. But here lies a difficulty. In ancient Rome, temptations were tangible but limited. In our age, they are endless, engineered with precision to exploit your psychology. Could Stoic self-restraint withstand algorithms designed to addict? Scholars debate this. Some argue Marcus would reject such tools entirely. Others suggest he would adapt them for discipline, turning even social media into a journal of reflection rather than a well of envy. Whatever the case, he would insist that you remain master of your consumption, not its victim. Picture him at a global economic forum where leaders discuss consumer spending as the lifeblood of growth. He stands and speaks softly. Do not confuse desire with prosperity. A man is rich not by what he has, but by what he can live without. His words would unsettle CEOs, but they would awaken citizens who feel trapped in cycles of debt and longing. Under his guidance, the pursuit of endless consumption might give way to a pursuit of balance where needs are met, but desires do not dictate existence. This lesson is not only for societies, it is for you. How often do you chase after the next thing, believing it will bring happiness, only to feel emptiness return? How often do you let envy corrode your peace because someone else has what you crave? Marcus whispers to you. Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Each time you master desire, you reclaim freedom. Each time you let it master you, you forfeit peace. Imagine Marcus sitting in a modern cafe surrounded by people glued to their phones, lost in endless scrolling. He sips a plain cup of tea, gazes at the sunlight through the window, and writes quietly in a notebook. No envy, no craving, only presence. You realize then that the greatest luxury in this century is not abundance, but contentment. If Marcus Aurelius led in the 21st century, his discipline of desire would ripple outward. Leaders would no longer glorify excess. Citizens would no longer measure themselves by wealth alone. The world would begin to see that peace does not come from more, but from enough. And in this lesson, you find a path for your own life to live not as a slave to desire, but as its master. Section 13 on Family in Modernity, Balancing Leadership with Love, Duty, and Presence. Family in Modernity. You picture Marcus Aurelius not in the marble halls of a Roman palace, but in a modest suburban home, perhaps returning late from a global summit, briefcase in hand, greeted by children rushing to the door. The 21st century asks of leaders and of all people not only professional excellence, but balance between duty and family. Could Marcus, philosopher emperor, known for his meditations on virtue and duty, reconcile the demands of leadership with the tenderness of fatherhood in our restless age? In truth, Marcus knew both joy and grief in family life. History records that he fathered at least 13 children, yet most did not survive infancy. The loss of children cut deeply into his soul, and still he wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." His meditations remind us that the fleeting nature of family bonds makes them all the more precious. He loved his wife Faustina, and despite the strains of empire and war, he tried to remain present in the small details of domestic life. Now imagine him transplanted into the 21st century, where the pace of leadership is relentless. Flights across continents, late-night meetings, endless demands for attention. Would he sacrifice family for duty as so many modern leaders do? Likely not. Marcus Aurelius would understand that without anchoring yourself in love, duty becomes hollow. He would see family not as a distraction from leadership, but as the very ground that gives leadership meaning. A ruler who cannot care for those closest to him cannot truly care for a nation. But here lies the paradox in a culture that glorifies productivity. How would Stoic devotion to family be received? Scholars debate whether Marcus's insistence on balance could survive in systems that reward endless work. Yet history hints at his answer. Even in the chaos of war, Marcus traveled with Faustina and their children, unwilling to let the empire's demands strip him of family bonds. This choice would resonate today in a world desperate for leaders who model balance, not burnout. Picture him on a televised interview, asked how he handles the pressures of global leadership. He does not boast of tireless work or sleepless nights. Instead, he says simply, "I write to my children each evening, no matter where I am." For if I cannot lead them with love, how can I lead anyone else? His words would cut against modern culture, where power often excuses neglect. Yet in their honesty lies healing, a reminder that leadership without tenderness becomes tyranny. And this lesson belongs to you as well. How often do you sacrifice those closest to you for ambition, for distraction, for the endless chase of tasks? Marcus's life warns you that loss is inevitable, that those you love are mortal, that time is fragile. His philosophy invites you to turn your gaze from the screen, from the ledger, from the endless grind, and look fully into the eyes of those who share your life. For in that gaze lies the deepest Stoic practice to love without clinging, to cherish without illusion. Imagine Marcus at a modern dinner table, children laughing, simple food before him. Outside, the world clamors for his attention, crises demand decisions, nations await his orders. But in that moment, he is fully present, listening, smiling, remembering that the empire is vast, but the family is irreplaceable. He knows the balance will never be perfect, but he strives for it nonetheless. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader in the 21st century, he would not let ambition erode family. Instead, he would show that true resilience is born not only in solitude and duty, but in the warmth of love and the daily practice of presence. For in the end, the empire fades, but the memory of a father's embrace, a partner's devotion, or a child's laughter, those endure longer than marble, longer than crowns. Section 14. Education and Virtue. Rebuilding schools around wisdom rather than profit. Education and virtue. You imagine Marcus Aurelius not in the halls of Rome's libraries or studying with his Stoic teachers, but in a 21st century classroom where students shuffle between glowing screens, standardized tests, and the pressures of competition. Today, education is often measured by grades, diplomas, and employability. Yet Marcus, who studied philosophy under the guidance of men like Junius Rusticus and Claudius Severus, would remind us that the true purpose of learning is not profit, but virtue. He once wrote in his Meditations, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." Applied to education, this means the goal is not to conform to systems that value productivity above wisdom, but to cultivate independent thought, integrity, and character. If he ruled today, Marcus would not praise schools merely for producing workers. He would ask whether they are producing human beings capable of justice, resilience, and compassion. In his own life, Marcus sought wisdom above all. Though raised in privilege, he pursued philosophy more eagerly than politics, writing, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." Imagine if every modern curriculum was built upon that sentence, not teaching students only equations and formulas, but training them to live as good men and women, to embody virtue in daily choices. Education would cease to be merely preparation for careers. It would become preparation for life. But here lies the modern tension. Can schools already burdened with endless demands really take on the task of moral education? Scholars debate whether Stoic ideals could survive in competitive economies that value speed and innovation. Marcus would answer that the absence of virtue in education is precisely why societies collapse. Rome itself fell not because it lacked wealth, but because it lost moral discipline. To neglect the soul is to weaken the foundation of the state. Picture him visiting a modern university. Professors present research grants, technological achievements, dazzling laboratories. Marcus listens quietly, then asks a simple question. "And what do you teach them about courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom?" The room falls silent. For in chasing advancement, education has often forgotten the very qualities that allow humans to endure success or failure without ruin. This lesson extends to you as well. How do you pursue knowledge? Do you gather facts as trophies, or do you seek wisdom as a guide? Marcus reminds you that reading without reflection is empty, and learning without virtue is dangerous. Each time you study, each time you consume information, you should ask, does this help me live better or merely appear smarter? Imagine Marcus writing his nightly meditations in a modern setting, perhaps in a dorm room, a quiet corner of a library, or even typed into a digital journal. Around him, students scroll through distractions, chase grades, or despair over competition. He sits calmly reminding himself that the true test is not whether others applaud his learning, but whether his learning shapes his soul. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader in the 21st century, education systems might be rebuilt around virtue. Philosophy would not be a forgotten elective. It would be the heartbeat of schools. Leaders would ask not how to make students more employable, but how to make them more human. And slowly, the culture might shift away from hollow achievement toward wisdom, away from shallow success toward character. And you listening now are invited into the same reflection, to study not for applause, not for advancement, but for transformation. For the truest education is not in books alone nor in degrees, but in the daily discipline of becoming the good person you are meant to be. Section 15 No. Global Unity. Applying cosmopolitan Stoicism to world citizenship. Global unity. You now picture Marcus Aurelius at a modern gathering, not in the Roman Senate, but at the United Nations General Assembly, where the flags of nations wave and interpreters' voices overlap in countless languages. The world is divided by borders, yet connected by trade, technology, and fate. In the 21st century, global challenges, climate change, pandemics, wars, poverty demand cooperation. What would Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, who believed all men are citizens of one great city, say to a world fragmented by nationalism and rivalry? In his meditations, Marcus often returned to the theme of cosmopolitanism. He wrote, "My city and country, so far as I am, Antoninus is Rome. But so far as I am a man, it is the world." This is not the voice of a conqueror, but of a philosopher who saw himself as a citizen of the cosmos. He believed every human shares the same divine spark, and therefore every human deserves dignity. For him, Roman borders were not the limit of duty. Duty stretched as far as humanity itself. Imagine him standing before the United Nations, listening as leaders quarrel over sovereignty, tariffs, or influence. When his turn comes, he does not argue for Rome or any single nation. He says softly, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee." Applied to today, it means no country survives while others collapse. No nation thrives while others starve. No people prosper while others suffer. Global unity is not idealism, it is survival. Yet here lies the tension. Would such Stoic universalism survive in the fiercely competitive world of modern geopolitics? Scholars debate whether Marcus's vision of a shared humanity could withstand the realpolitik of power. Would nations listen to a leader who urged restraint, generosity, and cooperation over dominance? Or would they dismiss him as naive? Perhaps they would at first. Yet Marcus's strength lay not in popularity, but in endurance. Even as emperor, he resisted the temptations of conquest for glory's sake, choosing instead to stabilize and protect. That same discipline carried into today might gradually reshape how leaders see themselves, not as rulers of nations alone, but as guardians of humanity. Picture him at a refugee camp, walking among tents, listening to families displaced by war. He does not see them as foreigners, but as fellow citizens of the world. He does not speak of borders, but of duty. His policies would not be driven by fear of outsiders, but by responsibility to the vulnerable. And in this, he would stand apart from many modern leaders who trade in fear for political gain. For you, this teaching also cuts deep. How often do you divide the world into us and them by nationality, by class, by belief. Marcus reminds you that such divisions are illusions. You breathe the same air, drink the same water, and share the same fleeting mortality as every other human being. To live as a Stoic cosmopolitan is to recognize kinship where others see difference. Imagine him writing in a quiet moment, reflecting on humanity's shared struggles. The universe is change. Life is opinion. Nations rise and fall, borders shift, empires vanish. Yet the shared bond of human dignity endures. Marcus would remind you that you do not choose where you are born, but you do choose how you treat those born elsewhere. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader of the 21st century, global unity would not be rhetoric, but responsibility. He would not promise a utopia, for he knew suffering is part of existence. But he would insist that the way forward is not through division, but through cooperation. The world may never erase borders, but under his Stoic vision, those borders would cease to be barriers to compassion. And perhaps in such leadership, the dream of a peaceful world would take its first true steps. Section 16. Silence versus noise. Practicing inner calm in a loud digital century. Silence versus noise. You picture Marcus Aurelius not in the quiet of a Roman courtyard, but in the endless roar of the 21st century. The city hums with traffic, billboards flash incessantly, phones vibrate with notifications, and leaders shout over each other on televised debates. You ask yourself, could a Stoic emperor who wrote his deepest truths in silence endure a century so addicted to noise? Marcus lived in a world of constant demands, too. As emperor, soldiers, senators, and citizens pressed him daily. Yet he carved out silence each night, with his wax tablets whispering to himself reflections that steadied his soul. He wrote, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul. Retreat to consult your own soul above all, and so continually." That sentence is not merely advice, it is survival. For Marcus, silence was not the absence of sound, but the discipline of retreat, the act of turning inward when the world screamed outward. Now imagine him stepping into the 21st century, where noise never ends. Political campaigns depend on shouting. Social media thrives on outrage. Entertainment floods every waking hour. Leaders today are expected to speak constantly, to comment on every event, to be perpetually available. Marcus would refuse this. He would stand apart, choosing silence where others choose noise. In a press conference, he might pause longer than modern audiences could bear, forcing them to sit with discomfort. In a cabinet meeting, he might listen without rushing to respond, showing that silence itself can be more powerful than speech. But here lies the paradox. Would such restraint survive in modern politics? Scholars debate whether Stoic silence would be misinterpreted as weakness or indifference. In a world where the loudest voice often wins, could a leader who embraces quiet find space to lead? Perhaps yes, because silence, when rooted in strength, unsettles the noisy. It creates a gravity that words alone cannot. Marcus knew this when he chose not to chase applause in Rome. He would know it even more in our century, where the hunger for attention consumes leaders and citizens alike. Picture him scrolling through the endless noise of modern feeds, arguments, outrage, trivialities. He would set the device down. He would ask you, as he asked himself, does this make me better, or does it pull me away from virtue? That simple question, repeated daily, could silence much of the world's noise in your own life. For you, the lesson is urgent. How much of your day is stolen by noise, not just literal sound, but the endless chatter of distraction? How often do you seek silence, not as escape, but as nourishment? Marcus whispers to you, if you cannot find stillness, you cannot find yourself. You do not need marble halls or desert retreats. You need only a disciplined mind. Imagine him walking through a modern city park, at dawn, headphones dangling but unused. Birds stir in the trees, traffic hums in the distance. Yet he focuses only on the rhythm of breath, the weight of the present moment. This is his silence, not an absence, but a fullness. And in that fullness, he becomes unshaken by the world's clamor. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader of the 21st century, his gift to the world would not be louder speeches or endless broadcasts. It would be the courage to be silent, to show that peace begins when the leader refuses to join the frenzy, when he dares to listen rather than shout, when he shows the people that truth need not scream to endure. And in following his example, you too may find that the quietest moments of reflection are the loudest lessons of all. Section 17. The test of power. Could Marcus resist authoritarian tendencies today? The test of power, you imagine Marcus Aurelius seated not on a gilded Roman throne, but in a modern presidential office, its walls lined with flags and screens, glowing with maps of the world. In the 21st century, leaders are tested not only by wars or plagues, but by the temptation of unchecked authority. Some drift into authoritarianism, justifying control in the name of order. Would Marcus Aurelius, given today's immense powers of surveillance, armies, and influence, resist the slide into tyranny? History gives clues. Unlike emperors before him, men like Caligula or Nero, Marcus Aurelius did not abuse power for vanity. He did not burn cities for amusement or crush enemies to inflate ego. He often reminded himself, do not waste the remainder of your life in thoughts about others when you do not refer your thoughts to some object of common utility. His power was always anchored in service, not self-indulgence. Even when enemies plotted or provinces rebelled, he sought justice rather than cruelty. Yet modern power is more subtle, more intoxicating. Technology allows leaders to monitor citizens' every move, control narratives, and manipulate populations. Could Marcus resist this temptation? Imagine him offered tools of surveillance, databases of private lives, algorithms that predict behavior. While other leaders might embrace such control, Marcus would pause. He would ask, does this serve justice or does it enslave? For the Stoic measure of power is not how much you command, but how little you corrupt yourself while commanding. But here lies the paradox: would restraint make him vulnerable? Scholars debate whether a leader who refuses absolute power can survive in a competitive world where rivals seize every advantage. Marcus himself faced this dilemma. His reign was filled with conspiracies, yet he rarely executed political enemies. His clemency, unusual for an emperor, sometimes cost him stability. And still he chose restraint over tyranny, knowing that to rule unjustly is to betray one's own soul. Picture him in a modern press briefing, asked whether he will expand executive authority to silence critics. He answers simply, "If I cannot persuade by reason, then I have no right to command by force." His refusal to dominate would shock a culture accustomed to leaders who cling desperately to power. Yet his words would also resonate, planting seeds of trust among those weary of manipulation. For you, this lesson arrives in smaller scale. How do you handle the little power you have over colleagues, family, or strangers? Do you dominate when you can, or do you act with restraint? Marcus reminds you the true test of character is what you do when you can get away with anything. The tyrant indulges, the Stoic endures. Imagine Marcus late at night alone in his office, writing not decrees of conquest, but reflections of humility. Around him, advisors urge him to expand his grip, to silence opponents, to ensure his legacy through control. He shakes his head, returns to his journal, and writes, "To do wrong is to harm yourself. To do injustice is to wound your own soul." Power to him is not a prize, but a burden, a chance to practice virtue under the heaviest weight. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader of the 21st century, he would show that the greatest strength of power is not in how widely it spreads, but in how firmly it restrains itself. He would remind the world that the empire of a man's soul is more enduring than any empire of land. And in resisting the temptations of authoritarian rule, he would prove that the truest mark of leadership is not domination, but the courage to serve without corruption. Section 18. Equality and Dignity. Stoic respect for all bridging modern divides. Equality and dignity. You picture Marcus Aurelius in a crowded modern square, not as an emperor above the masses, but as a man among men. Around him, you see faces of every color, voices speaking countless languages, banners raised for justice, equality, and human rights. In the 21st century, questions of dignity, of race, gender, class, and identity are among the most pressing. Would Marcus Aurelius, shaped by Stoic philosophy, uphold the equal worth of all, even in a time when division often prevails? In Meditations, he wrote, "Constantly regard the universe as one living being, having one substance and one soul." This conviction lies at the heart of equality. If all people share the same divine spark, then all deserve respect. Though he was emperor, Marcus did not glorify his own status. He reminded himself daily that he was dust like any other, bound to the same mortality. He did not believe emperors were gods. He believed all men were kin in nature. Now imagine him in the 21st century, addressing movements for civil rights or gender equality. He would not dismiss them as noise nor suppress them out of fear. Instead, he would listen. He would ask, "Are these not fellow citizens of the same world? Are they not part of the same hive?" For Marcus, the dignity of the bee and the good of the hive were inseparable. To neglect one group is to wound the whole. Yet here lies the tension. Roman society itself was built on hierarchy, and Marcus did not abolish slavery or dismantle inequality. Scholars debate whether his Stoicism, though compassionate, was limited by his age. Would a Marcus of today transcend those limits? Perhaps he would, for Stoic principles applied fully leave no room for systemic injustice. If virtue is the only true good, then birth status, gender, or color are irrelevant. In our century, with sharper awareness, Marcus's logic would push him toward radical equality. Picture him walking into a modern workplace, observing how some are praised while others are dismissed. He would not measure worth by titles or salaries. He would remind all it is not what a man says or does, but what he is. And what he is at core is part of the same human whole. In politics, in schools, in homes, he would urge dignity as the foundation of all relationships. And for you, the lesson is intimate. How often do you judge others by surface, by appearance, accent, or status? How often do you protect your own dignity while neglecting the dignity of others? Marcus's voice calls you back. Every insult you cast, every slight you give, is not against them, but against the shared soul you both embody. To respect another is to respect yourself. Imagine him at a global human rights summit. Leaders argue about policy, activists shout about injustice, and corporations calculate profit. Marcus rises and says only this: "You are citizens of one world. Act as if it were so." His words do not solve every debate, but they pierce through the noise, reminding all that beneath argument lies a truth too simple to ignore. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader of the 21st century, equality and dignity would not be reduced to slogans. They would be practiced as daily discipline, an emperor speaking gently to a servant, a leader treating adversaries as kin, a father reminding children that worth lies not in status but in virtue. And under such leadership, the world might slowly remember that to diminish another is to diminish yourself, and to honor another is to honor the shared breath of all mankind. Section 19. Work and Purpose. Replacing burnout with duty-driven fulfillment. Work and purpose. You now imagine Marcus Aurelius not in the Roman Senate or on the battlefield, but in a modern office tower, glass walls gleaming above a busy city. Inside, employees hunch over desks, rushing through endless emails, meetings, and deadlines. The 21st century worships productivity, yet millions feel hollow despite their labor. Burnout spreads like a quiet plague, and people question whether their work has meaning. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader here, how would he guide a world lost between overwork and emptiness? In Meditations, he wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I am rising to do the work of a human being." For Marcus, work was not drudgery, but duty, the practice of serving the common good. Even when exhausted, he reminded himself that bees do not resent their labor, and neither should he, for the hive depends on each contribution. His philosophy redefines purpose. It is not found in chasing status or wealth, but in aligning effort with virtue. Now place him in the modern age where success is measured by titles, promotions, and paychecks. Marcus would challenge this definition. He would not glorify endless hours or shallow ambition. He would ask instead, does your work make you just, disciplined, compassionate? Does it serve the community? A job that destroys your soul is no work at all. True labor builds character and contributes to the hive. Imagine him leading corporations not by maximizing profit, but by maximizing virtue, ensuring employees thrive as humans, not just as workers. But here lies the paradox. In economies built on competition, would Stoic restraint survive? Scholars debate whether Marcus's model of purpose-driven labor could endure in systems that reward exploitation. Would companies embrace virtue when profit beckons louder? Marcus's answer, drawn from his own reign, is that justice cannot be bargained. He endured the empire's endless demands without surrendering his humanity, and he would expect the same in our time, to work not for applause but for duty. Picture him addressing a group of exhausted employees during a corporate crisis. Instead of urging them to grind harder, he says, "Do not imagine rest is idleness. A bow that is always strung soon breaks." His words carry weight because he himself worked to exhaustion in Rome, yet still returned nightly to reflection. He would remind us that balance is not weakness. It is the very condition that makes endurance possible. And this lesson reaches into your life. How often do you confuse activity with purpose? How often do you trade peace for productivity? Forgetting that your labor should serve your soul, not consume it. Marcus whispers across centuries, do not waste the part of life that can be spent in pursuit of virtue. If your work leaves you empty, it is not truly yours. Imagine him at a modern office desk writing not quarterly reports, but reflections in a quiet notebook. Around him, colleagues rush with stress, but he moves calmly, completing each task with dignity. He is not hurried, for he knows the task is not to finish everything, but to do each thing well. This is the Stoic art of work, not frantic speed, but steady purpose. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader of the 21st century, the culture of work would begin to shift. Burnout would no longer be celebrated as loyalty, but questioned as folly. Productivity would no longer be an idol, but a tool for virtue. And in that shift, millions might rediscover that the true purpose of labor is not endless striving, but meaningful contribution, the kind of work that builds not only wealth but wisdom. Section 20. Cons. The soldier's lesson. Modern military through Marcus's humane discipline. The soldier's lesson. You now picture Marcus Aurelius not among the dusty legions of Rome, but standing in a modern military base watching soldiers prepare for missions, that stretch across deserts, seas, and skies. Drones hover above satellites, map the Earth, and generals analyze data instead of maps on parchment. Yet beneath all the technology, the human struggle remains the same: courage, discipline, sacrifice. Would Marcus Aurelius, philosopher and emperor, see war only as destruction or as a teacher of virtue? In the harshest classroom, Marcus himself knew war intimately. The Marcomannic Wars consumed much of his reign. He lived for years in military camps, writing passages of meditations under canvas tents while snow fell outside. He did not glorify battle, but he learned from it. He reminded himself, "You may leave this life at any moment. Let that determine what you do and say and think." For soldiers, death was always near, and so Marcus taught himself to live each day as if it might be the last. That same lesson echoes today for every soldier facing uncertainty on the front lines. Now imagine him addressing modern troops. He would not promise glory or easy victory. Instead, he would speak plainly. The enemy is not only before you, but within you. Fear, anger, hatred, these will undo you faster than any bullet. His message would unsettle those expecting fiery speeches, but it would fortify the soldiers' souls. For Marcus believed the true enemy is not outside events, but the passions that cloud judgment. In this, he would prepare armies not merely for combat, but for inner mastery. Yet here lies the paradox: can Stoic humility survive in military culture, which often celebrates aggression and conquest? Scholars debate whether Marcus's insistence on restraint would weaken armies or strengthen them. In Rome, he sought not to annihilate enemies, but to integrate them into the empire, treating captured tribes with dignity. In our century, such mercy might be seen as weakness, and yet his example suggests otherwise. By treating enemies as humans rather than monsters, he sowed seeds of stability instead of endless hatred. Picture him at a modern war council, generals urging retaliation after a provocation. Marcus listens calmly, then asks, will this action serve justice or merely vengeance? His refusal to indulge rage would redirect strategy from impulse to principle. Soldiers under his command would fight with discipline, not frenzy, knowing their leader valued not only victory, but virtue. And for you, the soldier's lesson applies beyond the battlefield. You may not wield a sword or rifle, but you fight daily battles against stress, temptation, and adversity. Do you charge with anger, or do you stand with discipline? Marcus reminds you the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing. You do not always move gracefully, but you must stand firm, ready to be thrown, yet ready to rise again. Imagine him walking among modern veterans, listening to stories of trauma and loss. He does not dismiss their pain, but he reminds them, you are not what has happened to you, but how you respond. His words would not erase wounds, but they would help transform suffering into strength, turning scars into teachers rather than chains. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader in the 21st century, the soldier's lesson would echo across armies and civilians alike. War would still exist, but it would no longer be glorified for spectacle. Instead, it would be treated as a grim teacher reminding humanity of mortality, duty, and resilience. And perhaps under his guidance, soldiers would fight not for conquest, but for peace, carrying within themselves the discipline of men who know that the greatest victory is not to destroy, but to endure with justice intact. Section 21 Docs. Failure and renewal. Stoic acceptance in times of economic collapse. Failure and renewal. You imagine Marcus Aurelius in the midst of a modern economic collapse. Stock markets tumble, banks shutter, and citizens line the streets in protest. The 21st century often promises stability, yet it delivers sudden shocks, recessions, depressions, financial crises, that shake entire nations. How would a Stoic emperor, who governed through famine, plague, and war, respond to the chaos of modern economic failure? Marcus Aurelius faced collapse often. During his reign, plagues emptied cities, war drained treasuries, and harvests failed. Yet he did not cling to illusions of permanence. He wrote in Meditations, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." He accepted that wealth, like health or life itself, is fleeting. In an empire where fortunes could vanish overnight, he taught himself, and by example his people, that renewal follows ruin if the mind remains steady. Now picture him at a modern financial summit after a crash. Reporters demand answers, citizens cry for relief. Many leaders might hide, deny, or deflect blame. Marcus would stand calmly acknowledging truth without evasion. This has happened. It cannot be undone. But what is within our control is how we respond with justice, with courage, with discipline. Instead of pouring energy into panic, he would turn to rebuilding, just as he once sold imperial treasures to relieve famine rather than clinging to symbols of wealth. But here lies the paradox: could Stoic acceptance of failure withstand today's obsession with constant growth? Scholars debate whether Marcus's insistence on renewal through discipline could calm societies addicted to prosperity. Would people follow a leader who reminds them that loss is natural, that hardship is not disaster, but transformation? Perhaps some would resist. Yet history shows that empires collapse not because of failure itself, but because of despair and corruption in response to it. Imagine him walking through the ruins of a financial district after a crash. Glass towers stand empty, symbols of ambition turned hollow. He pauses and says, "You are not ruined when you lose wealth. You are ruined when you lose virtue." His voice does not deny the pain of unemployment or hunger, but it directs attention toward resilience. Renewal begins not in markets, but in character. For you, the lesson is just as sharp. How do you respond when your own plans collapse? Do you despair when wealth slips away, or do you see in the fall an opportunity to rebuild wiser, stronger, freer from illusion? Marcus whispers across centuries, "Fortune is borrowed, never owned. What belongs to you is only your mind, your choices, your virtue. All else is transient." Picture him addressing a nation in crisis. Instead of promising quick fixes, he calls for endurance. Instead of blaming enemies, he calls for solidarity. He reminds people that Rome itself endured fire, famine, and plague, yet still rose again, not because of treasure, but because of courage. In his vision, renewal is not about restoring old illusions of endless prosperity, but about embracing simplicity, justice, and resilience as the new wealth. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader in the 21st century, failure would not be seen as final. It would be seen as a teacher. Collapse would not signal despair, but the clearing of ground for renewal. And under his steady hand, societies might rediscover that true prosperity is not the abundance of possessions, but the abundance of character forged in adversity. Section 22. Death and Legacy. Facing mortality in a culture that fears endings. Death and legacy you now picture. Marcus Aurelius not seated on a Roman throne nor at a modern summit, but alone in a quiet room, candlelight flickering against the walls. Around him lie the documents of a lifetime of rule victories and losses, treaties, and wars. Outside, the world continues indifferent. Death approaches not as tragedy, but as inevitability. In the 21st century, where death is often denied, hidden, or feared, what would a Stoic emperor teach about mortality and the mark we leave behind? Marcus Aurelius thought about death every day. In Meditations, he wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." These words are not gloomy, they are liberating. For Marcus to remember, death was to remember urgency, life is fleeting, but virtue endures. If he lived now in a culture that pushes death away with cosmetics technology and denial, he would remind us that to ignore death is to waste life. Imagine him at a modern funeral, surrounded by mourners lost in despair. He does not scold grief, but he speaks gently. Why should we fear what is natural? Why should we resist what comes to all? His philosophy would not erase sorrow, but it would give it shape. He would teach that death does not rob life of meaning, it gives it meaning. Without endings, there is no urgency to live well. Now picture him facing his own mortality in today's age, where some pursue immortality through science cryogenics or endless health regimens. Marcus would resist such pursuits. He believed that the value of life lies not in its length, but in its quality. Scholars might argue whether Stoic acceptance of death would clash with a modern obsession for longevity, but Marcus's answer would be clear. It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. This lesson cuts deeply for you too. How often do you live as if time is infinite, postponing joy, neglecting relationships, delaying virtue? Marcus presses you to reflect. If this were your last day, would you waste it in trivialities, or would you live with clarity and love? His writings, composed under the shadow of illness and exhaustion, remind you that every breath is borrowed. Legacy, too, held little meaning for Marcus. He wrote, "All is ephemeral fame, and the famous as well." He knew that even emperors are soon forgotten, their names reduced to inscriptions on stones. And yet he lived with integrity, not for legacy, but because virtue itself is worth practicing. Imagine him confronted by today's obsession with building brands, leaving marks on history. He would smile gently and say, "Do not strive to be remembered. Strive to be good. If remembrance follows, let it follow. If not, you still lived rightly." Picture him walking through a modern cemetery, rows of names etched into stone, many forgotten. He would pause, reflect, and write quietly, see how quickly all is dissolved. But virtue remains its own reward. In his vision, the true legacy is not monuments, but the quiet ripple of just actions, kind words, and disciplined living. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader in the 21st century, he would not chase immortality through fame, wealth, or technology. He would remind the world that every life, whether long or short, carries the same truth: death is certain, and what matters is how you live before it arrives. And perhaps under such leadership, we would learn not to fear endings, but to see them as the frame that makes the picture of life beautiful. Section 23:6. Friendship and loyalty. Would Marcus sustain genuine bonds in today's politics? Friendship and loyalty. You now picture Marcus Aurelius not surrounded by senators or generals, but seated with a small circle of trusted companions in the modern world. Perhaps they gather in a quiet cafe or around a dinner table after long hours of work. Outside, the 21st century races on with its dizzying pace, but inside, the question is timeless: what does it mean to be a true friend, especially for a leader burdened with power? Marcus Aurelius knew the rarity of genuine friendship. As emperor, flattery followed him everywhere. Courtiers praised him, generals sought his favor, and senators calculated every word to win advantage. Yet he longed for loyalty, not opportunism. In his meditations, he often thanked his teachers and companions like Junius Rusticus, who gave him Epictetus's writings, and Claudius Maximus, who modeled patience. These mentors and friends anchored him, reminding him of virtue when power tempted him to pride. Now imagine Marcus in the 21st century, where friendship is measured by followers, likes, and fleeting messages. Leaders today often find themselves surrounded by sycophants rather than friends, their loyalty tested not by virtue, but by convenience. Would Marcus tolerate such shallow bonds? Likely not. He would remind himself, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. True friends would be those who speak truth to him even when it stings. Picture him as a modern president or prime minister advisors whispering half-truths to secure their positions. He listens, nods, and then turns to the one voice that dares to disagree, the one who risks unpopularity for honesty. That person Marcus would value above all, for in his philosophy, loyalty is not blind devotion, but courage to hold each other to virtue. But here lies the paradox. In politics, loyalty is often demanded as submission. Would Marcus survive with such high standards of friendship, rejecting flatterers, welcoming critics? Scholars debate this, yet history shows he leaned toward openness. When accused of treason, some senators expected mass executions. Marcus pardoned them instead, preferring trust over fear. His reign suggests that even in power he sought genuine bonds, not alliances forged by terror. For you, this teaching resonates personally. How many of your friendships are built on convenience rather than truth? How many companions cheer you in success but vanish in hardship? Marcus challenges you to seek loyalty, not in numbers, but in depth, to value the friend who challenges you, who holds you accountable to virtue, who reminds you of what truly matters. Imagine him walking through a modern office late at night, pausing beside a colleague who stayed behind not for ambition, but for solidarity. Marcus would smile, recognizing the gesture as friendship, not the kind shouted in public, but the quiet loyalty that endures when no one is watching. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader in the 21st century, friendship and loyalty would not be commodities to trade. They would be rare treasures, chosen carefully, guarded fiercely, and measured not by comfort, but by truth. And perhaps in a world of shifting alliances and fragile loyalties, his example would remind us all that even emperors, and especially emperors, need true friends, for without them power becomes a lonely burden. Section $24. The practice of gratitude, cultivating contentment in a world of endless want. The practice of gratitude. You now picture Marcus Aurelius rising at dawn, not in a Roman villa, but in a modern apartment, sunlight filtering through blinds, the hum of the city below. Before he reaches for devices, before the day overwhelms him, he sits quietly with a notebook. Instead of checking emails or headlines, he writes a single reflection. Today, I am grateful to be alive. In the 21st century, where dissatisfaction is constant and comparison is relentless, Marcus's greatest gift might be the simplest gratitude. In Meditations, he wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." These are not poetic words, they are survival tools. He lived through plague, war, and betrayal, yet he forced himself to remember blessings each day. For him, gratitude was not ignoring pain, it was seeing clearly that even amid suffering, life itself is a gift. Now place him in the 21st century, where consumer culture thrives on dissatisfaction, where advertisements whisper endlessly, "You are not enough until you buy more." Gratitude would be his rebellion. Instead of measuring life by possessions, he would measure it by presence. Instead of envying what others have, he would remind you to treasure what is already yours. Breath family, a moment of peace. His gratitude would not be sentimental, it would be armor against despair. But here lies the paradox: can gratitude endure in a world so designed to stoke desire? Scholars debate whether Marcus's Stoic gratitude would survive in societies addicted to more. Yet his life suggests yes. He lost children, endured betrayal, faced plague daily, and still gave thanks. If gratitude could survive in Rome's darkest hours, it could survive in ours. Imagine him speaking at a global gathering after a crisis. Citizens cry out for what was lost. Instead of denying their grief, he says, yes, much has been taken. But look at what remains: each other, courage, the chance to rebuild. Do not waste this by dwelling only on loss. His voice would not erase pain, but it would redirect focus to the seeds of renewal. And for you, the lesson is close at hand. How often do you overlook the simple things, the breath in your lungs, the food on your table, the companionship of another soul, while chasing after what you lack? Marcus invites you to pause, to see the ordinary as extraordinary. Each time you practice gratitude, you step into freedom, for no one can take from you the ability to be thankful. Picture him walking through a crowded shopping mall in December, advertisements, blaring crowds, jostling for more. He steps aside, smiles gently, and writes in his small notebook, grateful for air, for life, for this moment. He has what the world cannot sell: peace. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader of the 21st century, gratitude would not be a soft sentiment, but a guiding principle. Nations would be reminded to value stability, communities would be taught to honor what they share, and individuals would discover that contentment lies not in abundance, but in appreciation. And perhaps under his guidance, gratitude would spread not as a holiday ritual, but as a daily discipline, one that makes even the heaviest burdens lighter. Section 25. Religion and philosophy, reconciling Stoicism with modern faith traditions. Religion and philosophy. You now picture Marcus Aurelius in a 21st century city where mosques call to prayer, churches ring bells, temples glow with incense, and secular thinkers gather in universities. Our age is one of diversity, faith traditions side by side, sometimes harmonious, often in conflict. Would Marcus, a Stoic emperor who honored Roman rituals yet leaned inward to philosophy, know how to navigate this tapestry of belief? In his meditations, Marcus often reflected on the gods, but never with superstition. He wrote, either there is a providence or atoms. Whichever it is, I must live a virtuous life. For him, the truth of the divine mattered less than the truth of conduct. If the gods existed, living justly honored them. If they did not, virtue still stood as its own reward. In Rome, this balance allowed him to perform rituals without losing his philosophical clarity. Now imagine him in the 21st century, where science challenges faith and faith challenges science. Some demand absolute belief, others deny any divine presence. Marcus would refuse extremes. He would say, do not ask whether the universe is guided by providence or by chance. Ask whether your actions are guided by virtue. His calm neutrality would unsettle zealots and skeptics alike, yet his example would draw many toward the middle ground, where wisdom, humility, and respect live. But here lies the paradox. In a world where religion often fuels division, could Stoic tolerance heal or inflame? Scholars debate this. Some argue that Marcus's detachment might seem too vague for people craving certainty. Others suggest his refusal to condemn or idolize would be exactly what modern pluralism needs: a leader who honors all faiths without elevating one above another. His guiding principle would be justice, not dogma. Picture him visiting a modern interfaith summit. Leaders of every tradition speak passionately, defending their truths. Marcus listens, then says quietly, if your faith leads you to justice, compassion, and courage, then it aligns with nature. If it leads you to cruelty or division, then it betrays both gods and reason. His words would not settle theological disputes, but they would call all faiths back to virtue as the common root. And this lesson is not only for nations, but for you. How often do you divide the world into believers and unbelievers, into right and wrong creeds? Marcus would remind you that the essence of life is not what temple you attend, but how you live outside its doors. You may honor gods or you may honor reason, but if you do not live with justice, gratitude, and discipline, your worship is empty. Imagine him in a modern cafe approached by a skeptic who asks whether he believes in God. Marcus smiles and replies, "I believe in living well. If there are gods, they will not fault me for that." His answer is both humble and firm, reminding you that faith, like philosophy, must be measured by its fruit in action. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader in the 21st century religion, and philosophy would not be weapons to divide, but paths to unite. He would not abolish faith nor dismiss science. He would anchor both in the soil of virtue. And perhaps under his rule, the world would discover that the truest worship is not in rituals or arguments, but in living daily with justice, humility, and love. Section 26 now. Art and expression. The Stoic view of creativity and cultural renewal. Art and expression. You picture Marcus Aurelius walking not through the marble halls of Rome this time, but through a modern gallery where digital projections dance across walls, where music thunders from speakers, and where artists push boundaries in every medium. The 21st century prizes expression art as freedom art, as protest art, as commerce. What would a Stoic emperor, who spent his life writing private reflections, make of this vast theater of creativity? Marcus himself was not known as a great patron of the arts like Hadrian before him, yet he understood art's role as mirror and teacher. His own meditations were not meant as art, but they endure as one of the most profound works of literature in history. Each line carved from struggle became an expression of his soul. He once reminded himself, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." In this sense, every act of creation, painting, music, poetry, architecture, is a testament to that truth. Art is change given form. Now imagine Marcus in the 21st century, faced with movies, music, social media, and performance. Would he dismiss them as distractions? Not entirely. He would judge them by the same measure he judged all things. Do they align with virtue, or do they corrode the soul? A song that awakens courage, a painting that stirs gratitude, a film that provokes reflection, these he would value. But art that glorifies cruelty or excess, he would see as corruption, no different than the gladiatorial games of Rome, where spectacle devoured virtue. Picture him attending a modern concert, where thousands raise their voices in unity, moved by music that speaks to hope. He would see in that gathering a reminder of Rome's forums, where shared words bound people together. Yet he would caution, do not mistake feeling for virtue. Inspiration must be followed by action. Art is not the end, but the spark. But here lies the paradox. In an age where art is often commodified, would Marcus's Stoic restraint diminish creativity? Scholars debate this. Stoicism calls for moderation, not suppression. He would not demand silence of poets or brush from painters. Rather, he would remind them that freedom carries responsibility. Just as words shape thoughts, art shapes culture. To wield art is to wield influence and thus duty. For you, this lesson is sharp. What art do you consume and how does it shape you? Does it uplift or degrade? Do you seek in it only escape, or do you let it challenge your soul? Marcus whispers across time. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. The art you absorb is the dye that stains your mind. Choose carefully, for it becomes part of you. Imagine him sitting in a small theater watching a film about injustice overcome by courage. When the credits roll, the audience applauds. Marcus sits quietly, turns to his notebook, and writes, Remember, applause is nothing. What matters is whether you leave and live better than before. His measure of art is not its popularity, but its power to transform character. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader of the 21st century, art and expression would be honored as vital but guided by responsibility. He would encourage creation not as indulgence, but as service to the soul of society. And under his hand, perhaps the world would remember that beauty is not merely for pleasure, it is for truth. For in the end, every work of art, like every human life, fades, but the virtue it awakens that can endure. Section 27. Citizens and Leaders. Training ordinary people in Stoic responsibility. Citizens and leaders, you now picture Marcus Aurelius not cloaked in purple robes, but standing in the middle of a modern crowd, where ordinary citizens gather with placards, phones raised, high voices demanding accountability from their leaders. The 21st century blurs the line between ruler and ruled. Every decision is scrutinized, every mistake amplified, and citizens themselves often feel powerless despite their numbers. What would Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, say about the relationship between citizens and leaders in our time? In Meditations, he often reminded himself that he too was only a man, a kingly lot to do good and be spoken of ill. He knew leadership was not glory, but burden, not privilege, but duty. As emperor, he viewed himself as servant of Rome's people, not their master. His writings reveal no contempt for citizens, no disdain for the common man. Instead, he continually returned to justice, reminding himself that his choices must serve the hive, not just the bee. Now imagine him stepping into the age of democracy, where leaders are chosen, questioned, and sometimes reviled by those they govern. Marcus would not resist this accountability. He would welcome it. He would see in the voice of citizens not annoyance, but opportunity to refine his rule, to remind himself of humility, to keep his decisions aligned with the people's good. He might say, "If they criticize me unjustly, I must endure. If they criticize me justly, I must change." But here lies the paradox in modern politics. Leaders often chase popularity while citizens grow cynical. Would Marcus, who cared little for applause, survive in a system fueled by approval ratings and polls? Scholars debate this. He would likely refuse to flatter, refusing to promise what he could not deliver. His honesty might cost him votes in the short term, but over time his steadiness could restore trust. For he knew that truth, though harsh, outlasts illusion. Picture him addressing citizens in a public square after a controversial decision. Protesters shout, journalists push forward, critics call him unjust. He raises his hand not to silence, but to listen. When he speaks, he does not defend his pride, but explains his reasoning grounded in virtue. If I am wrong, may reason show it. If I am right, then time will prove it. His words would not erase opposition, but they would reveal a leader unafraid of scrutiny. And for you, this lesson holds weight. You are both citizen and leader, citizen of your community, leader of your own life. How often do you demand of leaders what you do not practice yourself? How often do you criticize without striving for justice in your own sphere? Marcus reminds you that the health of society depends not only on rulers, but on the virtue of its people. Look well into yourself, he wrote, for there is a source of strength which will always spring up if you will always look. A just society begins when citizens, like leaders, discipline themselves. Imagine Marcus walking into a modern classroom where students debate government. He does not lecture about power structures. He asks instead, what do you demand of a leader, and what do you demand of yourself? The silence that follows is the real lesson. Responsibility is shared. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader in the 21st century, He would blur the divide between citizens and rulers. Leaders would be reminded they are servants, not idols. Citizens would be reminded they are participants, not spectators. And under such guidance, society might rediscover that the balance between rulers and ruled is not maintained by force, but by shared virtue. For in the end, the empire belongs not to one, but to all. Section 28. The rhythm of reflection. Daily journaling as guidance for modern life. The rhythm of reflection, you now picture Marcus Aurelius not on horseback at the frontier, but in a modern apartment late at night. The city outside pulses with neon lights and restless traffic, yet inside the room is quiet. On the table lies a simple notebook. Instead of issuing commands or scanning screens, he bends over the page and writes. In the 2nd century, these writings became his meditations. In the 21st century, they would become his anchor against the storm of modern life. For Marcus, reflection was not luxury, it was necessity. He endured the crushing responsibilities of an empire, and still he carved time to write for himself. When you have trouble getting out of bed in the morning, he reminded, think of what it is to act as a human being. His rhythm was daily morning discipline, evening reflection. This practice kept him from being consumed by duty. Without it, even an emperor could lose himself. Now imagine him living in our century, where the pace is relentless, where news updates arrive by the second, where silence is rare. Would he abandon reflection to keep up? Unlikely. He would cling to it more fiercely. Each day he would pause, perhaps journaling before dawn or walking in solitude at dusk. He would not post his thoughts for likes, nor filter them for public image. His reflections would remain private, a dialogue between soul and reason. But here lies the paradox. In the 21st century, people often mistake reflection for idleness. Productivity is glorified. Stillness is dismissed. Would a Stoic emperor's nightly journaling seem too passive, too unproductive? Scholars debate this. Yet Marcus would answer that without reflection, action is blind. The rhythm of reflection is what sharpens the blade of decision. To rule without pausing is to swing wildly without aim. Picture him advising a modern executive overwhelmed by meetings. Instead of urging more efficiency, Marcus says, stop. Write what you fear. Write what you desire. Then ask, are these within your control? The executive, though restless, at first begins to see clarity. Reflection is not escape, it is recalibration. And for you, the lesson is personal. How often do you race through days without pause, collapsing into sleep, without a thought for how you lived? Marcus invites you into his rhythm to begin each day with intention and to end each day with review. Write not for applause, but for honesty. Ask, did I live with justice today? Did I act with courage? Did I master my anger? This habit, repeated, becomes a fortress against chaos. Imagine him in a modern subway car surrounded by glowing screens. Others scroll endlessly. Marcus opens his notebook. He writes a few sentences, then closes it, eyes steady, mind calm. He is not distracted because he has given his soul the gift of attention. That rhythm, small but steady, shapes him more than any empire. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader in the 21st century, his greatest gift might not be new laws or victories, but this example of reflection. Nations would still face crises, leaders would still stumble, but if all paused daily to weigh themselves honestly, the world might shift. Citizens would live with intention. Leaders would govern with clarity. And under this rhythm, peace, inner and outer, might finally begin to grow. Section 29. Toward a peaceful world. Would Stoicism reduce violence and conflict today? Toward a peaceful world, you now picture Marcus Aurelius standing before a vast audience, not in the Roman Forum, but in a modern global assembly where leaders, activists, and citizens from every corner of the earth gather. The question that echoes across the hall is the same one you carry within you. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader in the 21st century, would the world truly be more peaceful? His writings offer both hope and realism. In Meditations, he said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This principle suggests that peace begins not in treaties or armies, but in the discipline of each soul. Yet Marcus also knew the stubbornness of human nature. Rome under his reign was not free of war. In fact, he spent much of his life on campaigns. Peace to him was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice and restraint. Now imagine him in today's turbulent world: nuclear weapons threatening annihilation, terrorism, destabilizing regions, nations arming themselves out of fear. Would he abolish war entirely? He would accept that conflict sometimes arises beyond one's control. But he would seek to contain it with humanity, to act without hatred, and to pursue reconciliation as soon as possible. Unlike modern leaders who glorify strength through aggression, Marcus would see true strength in self-mastery. To him, peace is not weakness, but wisdom, the courage to endure provocation without being consumed by rage. But here lies the paradox: would such stoic peace survive in modern politics, where fear often wins elections and aggression secures power? Scholars debate this. Some argue his restraint would be dismissed as softness. Others suggest it would inspire a weary world to rediscover its longing for calm. Perhaps both are true, for Marcus did not win every heart in Rome, yet his philosophy endured long after armies vanished. Picture him at a peace negotiation table where leaders posture for advantage. He listens silently, then speaks. "We are all citizens of one world. To harm another is to wound ourselves." His words may not dissolve centuries of rivalry, but they shift the tone. Under his guidance, even those who resist might begin to see enemies not as faceless threats, but as fellow humans caught in circumstance. And for you, the lesson is immediate. How often do you wait for others to bring peace while cultivating conflict in your own heart? Marcus whispers. If you want a peaceful world, begin by mastering your anger, your envy, your resentments. The wars of nations are mirrors of the wars within. To end them, each person must disarm themselves first. Imagine him walking through a modern city scarred by protests and unrest. He does not scold the people nor promise impossible solutions. He stands calmly reminding them, the best way of avenging yourself is not to become like your enemy. His message does not erase pain, but it plants seeds. Peace is not delivered by decree. It grows slowly, like a tree, watered daily by justice, courage, and self-control. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader of the 21st century, the world would not become a utopia overnight. Wars would not vanish, nor divisions dissolve instantly. But there would be a shift, a reminder that peace is not merely a political project, but a personal discipline, one practiced by leaders and citizens alike. And in that shift, fragile but real, the world might begin to remember that the path to peace does not run through conquest, but through character. Section 30. The Emperor's Final Counsel. What Marcus would whisper to this century's leaders. The Emperor's Final Counsel. You picture Marcus Aurelius at the end of his long journey, not in a Roman war camp as he once was, but in a quiet modern chamber where the world's leaders have gathered to hear him speak. Cameras are ready, translators wait, and millions watch live. Yet when Marcus rises, he carries no prepared notes, no polished speech. He speaks simply as he always wrote, words for the soul, not for applause. He reminds them that empires crumble, that nations rise and fall, that wealth and fame vanish like mist. All is ephemeral, he says, both the memory of those who lived before and the memory of those yet to come. If the 21st century believes itself immortal through technology progress or pride, Marcus's counsel would be this: remember mortality. Remember that the true measure of leadership is not how long you reign, but how justly you live while you reign. He would tell them what he once told himself: waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. To leaders drunk on debate and distraction, this would cut like a blade. He would call them back to simplicity: act justly, speak truthfully, serve humbly. The rest, the applause, the headlines, the monuments, mean nothing. Imagine him addressing the leaders of rival nations, men and women who carry the power to end the world with a single command. He looks at them not with fear, but with calm. You are all citizens of one world, he says. To destroy one another is to destroy yourselves. Rule your own minds, and you will not need to rule through fear. His voice carries no theatrics, yet it quiets the room because it speaks to what all secretly know but seldom admit: the greatest enemy is within. For you too, his final counsel lands gently but firmly. Your life may not be on the stage of nations, but you rule an empire of your own. Your mind, your choices, your daily conduct. What legacy will you leave? Will you be remembered for possessions and titles, or for the calm strength with which you lived? Marcus whispers that you cannot control remembrance, but you can control the quality of your actions now. And that is enough. Imagine his last scene in this modern vision. He steps away from the podium, walks quietly through the crowd, and disappears into the world, leaving no palace, no army, no crown, only the words etched in the hearts of those who listened. And in that departure, he proves the essence of his counsel. Leadership is not in holding on, but in letting go with dignity. If Marcus Aurelius were a leader in the 21st century, the world might not become perfectly peaceful, but it would be steadier, wiser, more compassionate. His example would remind us that power is fleeting, but virtue is timeless. And in a century, trembling with noise, greed, and fear, perhaps that reminder is what we need most. And now, as you let the final words of Marcus Aurelius settle, the pace of this story softens. The world outside may still rush: cars, moving screens, glowing voices rising, but here you are, invited to breathe more slowly. Imagine yourself in a quiet Roman courtyard at dusk. The marble is cool beneath your feet, the fountain murmurs softly, and the air is gentle with evening calm. Marcus once sat in such a courtyard, pen in hand, reflecting not on empires, but on the fleeting nature of life. He reminded himself that power fades, possessions dissolve, even memory itself is washed away. Yet in the face of impermanence, he discovered serenity. That serenity is not locked in the past. It is here for you too in this very moment. Close your eyes if you wish, and picture the vastness of the night sky. The stars that Marcus once gazed upon are the same stars above you now. They remind you that you are part of something larger, something eternal. In that perspective, your anxieties shrink, your anger softens, your heart steadies. Let his counsel linger gently. You have power over your mind. You cannot command the world, but you can command your thoughts. You cannot silence storms outside, but you can quiet storms within. And in doing so, you bring peace not only to yourself, but to those around you. So as you prepare to rest, release the noise of today and the worries of tomorrow. Carry with you only what is essential: gratitude for this breath, clarity for this moment, and courage for the days ahead.